Hi everyone, my name is David Green. I am a division chair in the College of Business. So welcome to our continuation of Business Week events. This is our first breakout session. So I hope you were able to attend the keynote with Rick Blaskin that just concluded. So this is the session with Professor Bill Kresse on election risk limiting audits. So if you were interested in the other breakout session on navigating work-family responsibilities across the globe, you can find that link on the Business Week website. So the Business Week website, I'll add that in the chat, but it's govst.edu/businessweek, and you should be able to find all the Zoom links for any of the sessions that you want. So we'll be having one, this is the first breakout session, then we'll have another breakout session, two breakout sessions immediately after this, and we'll have a transition period for that as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Professor Bill Kresse, who will be presenting our first breakout session. I'm going to stop the sharing and I'll turn it over to you, Professor Kresse.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the first breakout session. The pressure is on me now. So let's see how I can do with this. Okay, I'm going to go to the PowerPoint slides I've prepared, and then, as I say, hopefully we'll take a little time at the end to take some questions and answers. If you have a question, you can put it up in chat or raise your hand off of the participants list when we get to that. And so let's get started here. So I'm going to move this over here to the side so I can see my stuff. Okay. David, can everyone see the my PowerPoint slides at this point?
Not yet. I'm not seeing them.
Okay, that's probably my problem. Okay. All these platforms have different things here. Okay, let's go with this then. How's that? Is that better?
It's starting. It is coming up. Let's see. It says you're starting the screen share. And I'm still waiting. Waiting patiently and see if it's coming up. It's still saying that your screen share is starting. So you may let's try unsharing and resharing again and see if it works. There we go.
Okay, let's do that.
There we go.
It's up there. All right. Okay. Well, as you can see, and as you know before, because that's why you signed up. By the way, if you're looking for work-life balance, you're in the wrong room, but we're not going to let you leave. You're going to stay here. This is election risk. It's actually election risk limiting audits, and applying what has been a practice in the business world for a while, applying that to enhance election integrity. And in case you haven't heard, there is an election coming up. In fact, people are already voting. And if you haven't heard, I would suggest, stop reading Instagram and see what's going on in the world. So here we go. And this is me, William Kresse. Those are all the letters after my name. And let's talk a little bit about me, my favorite subject. And then let's talk about the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners and what this whole risk limiting audit is and why it's good and things like that. All right, let's see. Come on. All right. First, a disclaimer. As you saw in that thing, JD Esquire, that means I'm a lawyer, so I have to put this in. The following presentation is intended for educational purposes only. All materials and all comments by William Kresse are off the record, do not necessarily reflect the opinion or stance of the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners, Governor State University, and or Professor Fraud, LLC. Please, no wagering. And this is me. Again, all those credentials. I'm an associate professor in the College of Business at Governor State University, which is AACSB accredited. And I was named the Educator of the Year by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiner, apparently about 40 pounds ago, and back when I had hair. So, and if that wasn't enough, I am a commissioner of the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners. I'll tell you a bit about that. And yes, they do in fact give me a badge. And I am also known as Professor Fraud. I have registered that trademark. And you can follow my antics on I created my own company, Professor Fraud, LLC. You can follow me on professorfraud.com, also Professor Fraud on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Or maybe you've seen me or heard me on television. My most recent television interview was actually for KCBS in Los Angeles. And this was an appearance a while back on WBEZ radio here in Chicago. I've been on HBO on This Week Tonight. Well, there's my video, in fact, talking about the Equifax scandal. So moving on. And I was at the presidential inauguration about 4 years ago, and WGN at the last minute needed somebody to report from the street. They used me. So another thing. Now, a little bit about the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners, of which I am one of the commissioners. These, in fact, the election board on election day, we hire investigators, is what we call them. These were the investigators from 1933 or 32. And just to let you know, we no longer issue rifles and shotguns to our investigators. But so just a little bit on the history of the Board of Elections. During the late 1800s, election reform was sweeping across the US. And in the 1880s, pushed by Joseph Medill, who was the publisher of the Chicago Tribune and was mayor of the city. And the idea was to get the running of elections out of the hands of politicians and into independent election professionals. This is what happened. We're actually under the branch of the Circuit Court of Cook County, are considered to be such. There was a referendum was held. It passed overwhelmingly in Chicago. And so what we have is, and we see this in a number of major metropolitan areas where the city is run by an election board, but the suburbs is run by the clerk of the county. And that's what we have here. The suburban votes are done by the Cook County Clerk's Office, but within the city, it's the Board of Election Commissioners. There are 3 commissioners, the judges of Cook County, 3-year terms, and each year one of our terms expires. By law, membership must include at least 1 member of each of the 2 leading political parties in the state. That would be the Democrats and the Republicans. All right. Just an idea of our size, we have a budget of about $34 million. We have actually 1.55 million registered voters in Chicago. We have 2,069 precincts. That's a lot of precincts. That's more than the entire state of Iowa. We set, the board sets policy, much like a board of directors, sets policy, oversees the activities of our executive director, who's essentially our chief operating officer, and takes care of the day-to-day operations of the board. We have about 130 full-time employees throughout the year, but on election day, we have to train and employ about 15,000 temporary poll workers to serve at the polling places for the day. We also retain the services of about 50 attorneys just for election day and 500 members of law enforcement. These are off-duty and some retired law enforcement who are allowed to keep their guns and badges. And I was told that on election day, the Chicago Board of Elections is the 4th largest police force in the state of Illinois. So don't mess with me. At least I'm not on election day. Okay. So why are practices like risk limiting audits on election results so important? And I look at these polls. USA Today and Suffolk University in Boston regularly do polls of the American people. And one that came out last month, nearly a quarter of registered voters say that they're not prepared to accept the outcome of this November's election, the presidential election, if their candidate loses. And that is was like about the same percentage from both parties. So, you know, people say, well, if my candidate loses, I don't believe in the outcome. And then if we, a poll they did back in 2018 of people who don't vote, and they asked them, why don't you vote? 2/3 of them stay away from voting because they've given up on the political parties and a system they say is beyond reform and repair and is corrupt. So, you know, there's an old joke, especially told in Illinois, you know, that the system is not broken, it's fixed. The idea that the electoral system somehow, you know, the fix is in, it's already been decided. It's not true. So things like auditing the results of an election to show that when, you know, we announce that, you know, candidate A won over candidate B, people can have confidence that that in fact is what happened. Candidate A got more votes. Okay. Now, in any election, again, going back on my Professor Fraud, being a fraud examiner, all that, the vulnerability points in an election, there are, you know, four major ones and then kind of a new one. The candidates circulating petitions to get on the ballot, voter registration, you know, whether or not the voters are legitimate voters or eligible to be voters, the voting process itself. What this little talk is going to talk about is the tabulating and reporting of results. Okay, so the votes have been cast, and then somebody has to add them all up. Well, can you trust that that is going to be accurate? And then this past season, especially, or current season, vote by mail. By the way, this is a photo. My dog is a Scottish Terrier. She's in the room with me, and she insists that I have to always post that photo in all my presentations. Okay, tabulating and reporting results. This is actually a voting machine that we used to use in Chicago and Cook County. That's what they look like. And if any of you remember those, you're probably an AARP member as well. But that goes back quite a bit. All right, so why is this so important? Well, as this man reportedly said, it's not the people who vote that count, it's the people who count the votes, okay? And a lot of people don't trust elections because or don't vote because they say, well, I'll vote, but, you know, the politicians count the votes and they determine who's going to win. So as I say, my job, you know, or my mission is trying to convince people that no, we actually do have a fair process. All right. So, and what could go wrong with tabulating and reporting election results? Well, there can be just the intentional alteration of tallies. That old voting machine I showed a few minutes ago, that thing was remarkably bad because it was remarkably easy to simply change the numbers. They had little, you know, little counters that were like the trip meter in your car. You could very easily change the numbers on it. So it's an intentional alteration. And then there's just bugs in the election equipment, such as scanners that skip over some ballots, scanners with black sensors, and then software errors, either intentional or by malicious subversion. And as you've probably seen in the paper, here's an ad from an old movie, Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. And there's a lot of concern about offshore interference in an election process, especially hacking into our election systems so as to change the results. You'll be happy to know that I am regularly briefed by the Department of Homeland Security. The board shares the services with the county election authorities of an election, or rather a computer expert who's continually watching our systems, looking for any possible incursions. So we're on it, okay? So what is it that we do? Well, again, I'm going to talk mostly about Chicago, what we do here. Right now, Chicago only uses paper ballots. We've used paper ballots for a long time. But some of you might recall, you'd have touchscreen machines, especially on our early voting sites, where you would touch a thing, and the only paper would be like a small thermal paper roll on the side. We've gotten rid of those machines. I'll show you what our new machines look like. Also, before any machine leaves our warehouse, and our warehouse is under 24-hour police guard, it goes through what we call pre-lat, pre-election logic and accuracy testing. We have pre-marked votes, ballots, we run it through, and then we see what the results are. We know what the results should be. So that's just one of the tests that we do on each piece of our election equipment. We have physical controls. Before, during, and after the elections, we have pre-numbered tamper evidence seals on anything that carries election supplies, on the voting equipment itself. Any like package of ballots is sealed, and then the election judges have to sign off on them. So we have physical controls in place. This is our new piece of equipment that we use at early voting sites, and there'll be at least one at every polling place. Now, early voting sites, you can go to any of the 51 sites that we have and vote your ballot for where you live. The city of Chicago, we have over 400 different styles of ballots because of all of the jurisdictions cutting in and out, okay? So we have all of these styles of ballots. So using this device, we can call up your particular ballot style. Additionally, for each ballot style on this device, we can call it up in 12 different languages. So if you're uncomfortable with English or you don't speak English, we can pull it up in, as I say, we have 12 different languages that we've translated our ballots into. Even the visually impaired, rather than having somebody mark the ballot for them, we can hook up this device where using their fingers, they can direct to where they want to mark their ballot. The key to this is over here. This is an off-the-shelf HB printer. Again, it's checked for the software is checked before we send it out. But after you make selections, it prints out on a sheet of paper your ballot that you can look at and inspect and make sure it printed out, you know, the candidates you wanted. So whether you use one of these touchscreen machines to print out a ballot or are given a paper ballot, you've got a paper ballot that you can verify before you cast that ballot. Okay, and this is where you cast the ballot. Now, whether it's at a polling place, in-person voting, you will come over to this machine. And what's new about this, you know, the bottom part, the ballot box, where the pieces of paper drop into, that's the same. What's different is the machine on top. Your ballots look, if the paper pre-printed ballots that you'd fill in with a pencil, that look like a standardized test form where you're going to be filling in ovals, okay? So much like an old Scantron test reading machine, this machine will read that ballot and count how many votes and who you voted for, okay? Additionally, what's new about this machine, it also takes an image of your ballot and stores it in a PDF file. The internal memory on that then takes all of those, you know, ballots images and randomly sorts them. So if you get somebody accessing that PDF memory pack or data pack, they can't figure out which vote was yours. Okay, because like you're the first voter would be the first vote on the data pack. No, it's jumbled. Okay, it's randomized. So this is new because of that feature of taking scans of each ballot, photos essentially of each ballot. Okay. Additionally, we have what we call an air gap. So all of these machines, none of them connect to the internet. Okay, so that kind of, frustrates our friends who are trying to hack into at least our tabulation system. The official counts are recorded on the memory packs of those ballot scanners. Okay, and again, if you're voting by mail and you either mail back your ballot or drop it in one of our drop boxes, that ballot will be processed and will be run through that same kind of scanner. Okay, so there's an air gap between the internet and our equipment. Again, tallies are completed at the precinct level for in-person voting, and we will transmit early unofficial results using cellular phone lines. Okay, again, not the internet, but the official is what's recorded on those data packs. Now, currently, under Illinois law, after the election, we have a 5% audit because the state law says you have to audit 5% of the ballots. And the Illinois State Board of Elections, the ISBE, the Illinois State Board of Elections, they're the ones that select which scanners are to be audited. Okay, so they give us, each scanner has a unique number. They give us a list of the numbers. We then have to pull all of the ballots that were processed through those scanners, the results of those scanners. And again, this is 5% of the votes. Okay, so I mean, just think, if we get 1 million ballots cast, okay, you're talking, was that 50,000 ballots we're looking at. Okay, and we hire, again, some of those 15,000 people to by hand look at each paper ballot, count it, on a tally sheet, and compare it to the votes that machine recorded for every race that was on the ballot. Okay, it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's inefficient, and because you're talking human error, somewhat inaccurate. Okay, which brings us to risk limiting audits. Okay, finally, what is the risk? The risk is the chance that an election authority will report the wrong outcome of an election. So candidate A actually gets more votes, but the election authority reports that candidate B won the election. Okay, so that's the risk that we're trying to limit with these audits. So again, it's an audit of an election contest that provides strong statistical evidence that the election outcome is right. Risk limiting audits do not guarantee that the reported outcome is right, but they have a large chance of correcting an outcome if it was reported wrong. Thus, a risk limiting audit has a high probability of correcting a wrong outcome. Risk limiting audits demand that close races get more scrutiny, that makes sense, if the margin of victory is close. Okay, and a risk limiting audit requires examining a large number of ballots from that race. The efficiency comes in that if the margin of victory is wide, fewer ballots need to be reviewed to ensure high confidence the outcome is correct. Okay, right now, whether the a race is close or not, we still have to count the same number of ballots. If somebody won the race, 90% to 10%, you kind of, you don't really have to look at that many ballots to figure out, yeah, the 90% person won. Okay, and which is what brought me to MIT. Here I am at the MIT Sloan School. This is the business school at MIT for the Election Audit Summit. This was in December of 2018. And I was invited to attend and to make a presentation at the Election Audit Summit. It was co-sponsored by Caltech and MIT and something they have called the Voting Technology Project. There I am, with a panel of folks here to make my presentation. Now, what's interesting is all the presenters, and really everyone in the room, we're talking about auditing, right? I was the only CPA in the room. I was the only CPA, I was the only business professor who was invited. I was the only fraud examiner. There were a couple of election authorities, but mostly the room was it's IT. So we had statisticians, we had computer science professors, a lot of political science professors, a few law professors. But again, it's like, and what I found was these folks had been doing about a year's worth of work reinventing the wheel, doing things that we've been doing in auditing for decades, okay? And I've since gotten some auditing professors from around the country to work with this crew. What is it that a risk limiting audit does? And there you have it. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you there was going to be math on this. So solve for D. No. This actually was part of one presentation, but we're not going to go into this, not with the time we have left. So we'll move on. Okay. The risk limiting audit involves manually examining portions of an audit trail, generally paper records, but we'll talk about not what we're going to try and do in Chicago, but in this case, ballots. The risk limiting audits and the techniques used to conduct them have been used in some form in audits of businesses for years. Okay, consider this. The simplest risk limiting audit is an accurate full hand tally of a reliable audit trail. So the best post-election audit is simply count every ballot. Okay, and in fact, they do that. In small towns up in Canada, they do this in their parliamentary elections because they have one race and one sheet of paper for each voter with one. It's fairly easy to do. Okay, such a count reveals the correct outcome. However, a full hand count generally wastes resources if you're counting every ballot, and you don't need to because of a large margin of victory. Okay, examining far fewer ballots often can provide strong evidence that the original reported outcome is correct if those ballots are chosen at random. Hence, to keep the counting burden as low as possible, a risk limiting audit will stop counting when the audit at that point provides sufficiently strong evidence that a full hand count would confirm the original outcome. So let's say, again, that's race, it's 90-10. So you randomly select ballots and you start counting them. And if they're all coming in for candidate A, at some point you'll say, hey, let's just stop. We're confident candidate A won because the average we're getting from the sample, a randomly selected sample, would definitely indicate, maybe not that, it may not indicate that A won by 90%, but it would indicate that A won. And that's all we care about, who won versus who lost. Okay, but as long as the audit does not yield such sufficiently strong evidence, you keep counting. If it's a really close election, you just count all the ballots anyhow. Okay. What do we mean by sufficiently strong? It's quantified, and that's part of that equation I showed you, by risk limit. The largest chance that the audit will stop short of a full hand tally when the original reported outcome is in fact wrong. So the risk limit is not the chance the outcome reported after the audit is wrong, but the largest chance that the original reported outcome is wrong and the audit doesn't catch it. Okay. Wow, this is a ballot for this November's election in the city of Chicago. 2 long sheets of paper printed on both sides. Wow, wouldn't this risk limiting audit be just very burdensome in the city of Chicago just from the number of people on the ballot? Okay, after all, Illinois is actually the #1 election state. There are 520,000 elected officials in the whole United States, 8.3% of them right here in Illinois. We have more units of government and more elected officials than any other state, even like California and Texas. We have nearly 7,000 units of government, including 3,000 special districts, school districts, park districts, road districts, civic center, my favorite, mosquito abatement districts, okay? Some other time ask me why that's so. It has to do with our old Illinois Constitution. All right. But remember, to keep the counting burden as low as possible, a risk limiting audit will stop when the audit at that point provides sufficiently strong evidence, that a full hand count would confirm the original reported outcome. Thus, okay, we can keep our sample size and the amount of counting small and the audit inexpensive if a margin of victory is large, which is often the case in Chicago. For example, that 4-page ballot I just showed you, let's look at like one of the largest parts. Okay, these are the races for circuit court judge. They're all uncontested. Guess what? How many ballots do you think you need to count to realize that if anyone gets one vote, they've won the race? Okay. So because the large number of uncontested elections, basically, look at, just for fun, look at 5 ballots and call it a day. But maybe 50. But even if it's a widespread thing, it's between a major party and a small third party or an independent candidate, you don't need to count that many votes to know that the original declaration was correct. Okay, how small a sample? I love this. In all the papers I got at MIT, this chart was the best, and it's on Wikipedia. Okay, so let's look at. Okay, here are the number of votes cast: 156, 625, 2,500. Okay, somewhere between 640,000 and 2.5 million would be where the city of Chicago would lie. Now, if the margin of victory is 16%, okay, so one candidate got 58%, and the other candidate got 42%, 16% margin of victory. All with over 1 million votes, all we'd have to look at is about 175 ballots. At that point, we would be 90% confident that the original declaration that candidate A won is correct. Okay. As it gets closer, if it gets down to 49.9 versus 50.1, you might as well just count every ballot. It's going to end up that way. They'll go to court and get the order anyhow. Okay, but for all of these races that are not close, we can be confident in the results. We can tell the voters and the citizens you can be confident in our results without having to spend all the money that we're currently spending doing the 5% audit. Okay. A couple of notes. Described above is what we call ballot polling, where auditors select and count a random sample of ballots and report on the difference between manual percentage for the sample and the previously reported votes percentages from the machine counted ballots. Risk limiting audits are results audits to determine if votes were tabulated accurately, not a process audit to determine if good procedures were followed. And again, for Chicago now, we've got this scanner. So instead of having to go through piles of paper, we can sit in a computer room, pull up all the ballots on any particular race and view the PDF scanned images of the ballot rather than having to, play with a lot of paper. Okay, now I see we got 7 minutes left. I can take questions, I can talk about. Go ahead, David.
I got very caught up in your presentation, so I didn't give you a time warning. But I think we'll probably start the next presentation about 5 minutes late, since we started 5 minutes late on yours. So, but if you could wrap it up, I think there are likely lots of questions. I know I have a lot of questions, but I'm. Are you near?
you that equation? I know you, David. Okay, tell you what, I'll go through this real quick because I know this is on a lot of people's mind. Is voting by mail safe? Okay. All right. And I hope so, because there's my wife and I, we're casting our ballots in one of our drop boxes in the city of Chicago. Okay, our vote by mail ballots. Okay, you'll notice here's a Chicago Chicago return envelope. The key is right there where you sign the front of the envelope. Okay, and then you either mail it to us, or right now we only have 2 drop boxes available. One's 24/7 in front of 69 West Washington across the Picasso downtown. But on October 14th, we'll have over 50 of them, okay, across the city. Here's some breaking news. the 51 early voting sites, plus a number of Chicago public libraries. But look for the drop boxes that look like that. Don't put it in the book return. Okay, that doesn't work. This is what the drop boxes look like, and they will have big locks on them and seals. When we take the ballots out, we have a transfer case. We put numbered seals on it. We control the numbers, so everything gets back to us at the election board. Once we get there, okay, here's the key to the system: is where you sign. This is a county ballot, where you sign, and this up here. Okay, that barcode, that is keyed to your voter registration. Okay, and then also the mail barcode, where you can then track it like you can track a package now. Okay, once we get it back, we have, with the city of Chicago, the Board of Elections, we have two of these things called an Agilis machine. We load it up with all those envelopes. It can process 19,000 envelopes in an hour. Okay, it rolls through this machine, sorts them out. Okay, here's where it goes through. Okay, each envelope goes flying through that thing, and you see this light here in the blur of activity. What's back there is a high-speed camera that takes a photograph of that barcode and your signature. Okay, it then sorts them out. We have 25 different trays attached to ours. It's the largest machine that Agilis makes. Then that image of your signature on the front of that envelope is put up on one screen, okay? And then by reading the barcode, the signature that we have on file for you goes up on the other screen, and a panel of 3 election judges who've been trained in signature identification will verify their signature. 3 judges, again, 2 from one party, 1 from the other. We'll make that determination. Can you drop it in the mail? Yes. Even if every voter in the U.S. mailed their ballot, there would be 150 million. In December, the post office handles 3.5 billion Christmas cards. They can handle this, okay? This is the equipment they got rid of. It handles big flats. It doesn't handle election ballots because they're considered standard mail. Become an election judge at chipollworker.com. If you live in the city, or if you live in suburban Cook County, you can be an election judge in Chicago. And by the way, if you use a box rather than put it in the mail, we'll get the ballot that day, or we'll register it by the next day. And it saves the taxpayer about 65 to 75 cents each, because the postage that we have to pay is that much for return. Okay, now questions.
We have a question from Alice Keene. She's raised her hand.
I think I know her. Alice?
Yeah, that is possible, Bill. I am really excited about this presentation. Thank you so much for doing this. I have 2 questions actually. One question is these sort of, I don't know if it's fear mongering or something like that, but the question that if everybody votes by mail, the tallies will not be complete until potentially 2 weeks after the election, and various individuals may claim that they've won before the election results are fully counted. Is that a problem with this way of voting, with voting by mail or voting by drop box?
It depends on the jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions, some states require the ballots to be received by election day. In Illinois, the ballots have to be received by, the ballots have to be postmarked by election day, on or before election day. And you might say, well, do I have to take it into the mail, into the post office and have it stamped? No, if you look at your mail, down at the bottom of all of your letters, you'll see a real faint barcode. In that barcode is the postmark. That Agilis machine, it reads those. So every ballot that we would receive after election day will read that. If it's postmarked on or before election day, we process it. If it doesn't, we kick it out. And in Illinois, we have up to 2 weeks after election day to accept ballots. Okay, so if you're mailing it and your post office is real slow, you have 2 weeks. Generally, we'll get a bunch in the day after the election and a few after that, and it trickles off within a few days. So yeah, that's a problem, but again, in a long time, the state of Illinois, the election results are not posted, are not official until 3 weeks after the election or more. So yeah, that's just nonsense. By the way, that's a 10-sided die, which we sometimes use in making random selections. At that MIT conference, the local Dungeons and Dragons store in Cambridge was sold out because we all ran down there to buy it. And who would have guessed they'd have a Dungeons and Dragons store in Cambridge, Massachusetts? You know. Next question,
And
Alice.
I have one other question. There's a lot of press, it seems like, and other questions in social media about foreign governments interfering in U.S. elections. That my understanding is that interference runs into more like posting fake news on social media rather than actually somehow getting access to the counting of ballots. Is that correct?
Yeah. You never want to say, you know, no way that can happen. Okay. But we've hardened our systems. As I say, we have the air gap. They can't get into it. Now, one of the beauties really of not having centralized counting and a centralized nationwide counting, that would be easy to penetrate and mess everything out. If some country wants to come over here to the US and try to mess things up, just in Illinois, we have about 120 different election authorities. They'd have to go to each one of them, okay? So that's hard. What we're seeing with foreign interference is they have been hacking into voter registration files. We're keeping an eye on that. We're doing redundancies on that. But most of it is the social media and fake news and stuff like that. So just keep reading the Wall Street Journal and you'll be fine. Any more questions? Okay, 10-sided die. What else do I have to say?
Well, I do
the
have
other thing is, go ahead, David, go ahead.
So I just had a question about your, so City of Chicago is already doing the 5% audit. What's the time frame post-election when that actually occurs? So that's a big undertaking. It's expensive. You said, so the current, not using the proposed risk limited audit, when does that happen?
We have to do it. We start the day after the election, okay? With the scanners, we can't use the scanners that are being used for vote by mail since they have 14 more days. But the state board picks out the scanners that we have to look at, and we start the day after on the other scanners, and we have 3 weeks, between 2 to 3 weeks to complete that. And so we have just rooms full of people. It's going to be difficult with social distancing. We've actually rented out whole new floors of our headquarters building to spread people out to do this. So it's a major undertaking, and that's where risk limiting audit gives you a better post-election audit, and a lot cheaper and more efficient. Better for the taxpayers, better for everyone. One thing I want to say is if you mail a ballot back to us or use a Dropbox, if you get it back to us earlier enough, we're seeing, because of the learning curve, so many people are doing this the first time, they don't sign the front of that envelope, they don't seal the envelope, that ballot will get rejected. But if you send it in early enough, we can call you, we can email you, we'll send you a letter saying, hey, you can come down here and fix it, okay? So get it in early, and if it's a problem, we'll let you know.
So I know it's been some time, but has our technology moved beyond the Chad faux pas that, we had, several years ago in the national election?
Yeah, nobody uses the punch cards with Chads anymore. There is some people that keep talking about, well, hey, we can use blockchain. You could, personally, no. I am maybe old school in this, but I want votes on paper, because that creates the audit trail that you can always go back and verify. So I think it sort of improved by dropping back and using the paper ballot that the voter marks.
So that's consistent across the country?
It's not yet, but that's the trend. There's still some places that don't use that, but they are changing as we speak.
Thank you.
We have time for one final question in the chat. Colton asked, is there a plan to regain voter confidence in the process? And is that something the Election Commission is trying to work on?
We're trying to work on it. We actually had, we've got our own communications people that are trying to get that word out to the media. But the media, if it bleeds, it leads, and building up voter confidence doesn't get the headlines. But we're going to keep pressing on it. We want, I'm personally trying to do all I can to get the word out, to tell people you can be confident in the results that your election authorities are reporting after the elections.
Thank you so much, Professor Kresse. Great presentation, so interesting. And thanks for the participants. We're going to transition to our next session. So as we do that, I'm going to stop the recording for this session.